Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today I finally decided to put together my tier list for Star Wars Unlimited, and we're gonna go through this together, starting from the starter leaders. And but before I jump into it, I'm gonna explain how I decide to rank those leaders. So, of course, this is still very early on. In my last tier list video, when I ranked all the leaders, I had already had about 8 months of experience playing the game. So even though, of course, I got a few things wrong, I felt like my opinion was relatively well informed. This time around is a little bit different because I had really a little bit, just a little bit of time to playtest those leaders, and there's a few of those leaders that I haven't played. However, you can argue that I have a bit more experience with the game, but I still think that I'm likely to get a lot more things wrong this time around compared to on my Spark of Rebellion tier list leaders. But before we start, let's get into how I do my tier list. So basically, in red in S tier, I put the meta-defining slash overpowered leaders. So overpowered doesn't mean ban worthy, but it means that this leader is clearly has something that other leaders don't have. Meta staple is basically a leader that is going to be a very strong leader that's going to be part of the metagame. Solid means that they're good leaders that are going to be making strong decks and are going to be players in the meta, but maybe not as important as the meta staples. Playable means leaders that can be competitive and can sometimes pull some strong stuff, but overall are going to be very specialized and very niche. And finally, no competitive, not competitive means that they even though you can win games with them, overall, if you decide to play those leaders, you shoot yourself in the foot, you give yourself a disadvantage. So, with that out of the way, I also wanted to give an element of comparison by showing you my Spark of Rebellion. So this is what I mean. You see Boba Fett here as overpowered slash meta defining leaders, then meta staples. Once again, here I'm not talking about the deck, I'm talking about the leaders, just to make things very clear. Meta staple here, leaders that were strong players in the meta, solid, very good leaders, but maybe a little bit more situational. Playable, you can build strong decks with them, you can do some good stuff, but overall, relatively niche leaders. And then not competitive is going into the D tier. Okay. So, with that out of the way, now that we're all on the same page on how we are ranking those things, let's start with the starter leaders first. Okay, that's the wrong tab. That's also the wrong tab. Yeah, Moff Gideon. So, Moff Gideon is an interesting leader in the sense that um, is a leader that allows you basically to gain the early stage of the game and to dominate the board in the early stage of the game because it gives a bonus attack to basically all of your units, and this ability costs no action because you attack at the same time as you use the action, and it also costs no resources at all. So it's actually a pretty good ability to gain the board advantage early on in the game. It has a couple of interesting combination with the incinerator, which is like kind of the 2/2 that deals damage before the opponent, and it makes your super laser technician quite good. He's kind of like a leader that really helps you to gain an advantage in the issue of the game. Um, and whenever he flips over, then he becomes kind of a more generic leader, like a 3/6 overwhelm. So what can I say about Moff Gideon? So I think Moff Gideon is kind of a niche leader, but I think in the right situation, he can be a pretty powerful leader, and um, he can be a pretty powerful leader because his ability is actually quite powerful, giving a +1 attack bonus to any unit. I mean, any unit that 3 or less, which is the majority of your unit that you play in early stage of the game. I think this is kind of I think it's a powerful ability, especially when it's like completely free, almost like that. So it's an ability that I personally find could be quite strong. And I think the disappointing part about Moff Gideon is his flip side, is the uh, being a 3-6-4-5, overwhelm is pretty much irrelevant. Yeah, now all of your units gain +1 overwhelm, which is kind of neat. But overall, I feel like his flip side is a little bit on the weaker side. So if we compare this to other leader, I feel like if you want to play like a double green ramp deck using command, and you want to play something that is not as greedy as something like a Palpatine, Gideon is going to be your best option. I think if you're trying to build kind of a ramp double green deck, that is less greedy than the Palpatine green deck, and you want something that can interact with the opponent in the areas of the game that does much better against aggro, I think Moff Gideon is going to be a better option than Palpatine, and he's also going to be a better option than Tarkin because Tarkin is kind of slow, requires you to pay resources, requires extra action. Moff Gideon is right away, it is free, and it gives you the +1 bonus attack right away. So I think that if you're looking for that kind of rampy deck that wants to interact with the opponent a bit more in the early shift of the game, Moff Gideon is going to be a decent option for that if you're going for double green. For any other sort of like green ramp deck, I feel like there's going to be better option if you're going for green blue. You might prefer to play obviously something like a Krennic. But overall, I think Moff Gideon is definitely, in my opinion, a playable leader, so I decided to put him in the playable category. I think he's is playable for that very reason. Next, we got the Mandalorian. So this was a hard one for me to judge because Mandalorian can be very good against certain type of decks and completely trash against others. And basically, the way it I feel about it is that the ability to exhaust enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP, this ability can be very strong against aggro when you're trying to race, and you're putting some equipment on top of the unit, and then you can exhaust the enemy unit, and then you can raise them like that. Um, oh yeah, another thing about Gideon that I didn't mention, I'm so sorry about that, is about the Gideon's Architects, like the Gideon ship, is actually quite powerful, and it's like an additional reason to be playing ramp. It's kind of like an Ohm 1 for villainy, and it is very similar to Ohm 1 in terms of power level, so that's like another reason to play Moff Gideon is have access to that ship, which is quite valuable if you're going to be playing once again a ramp deck, and it gives you additional options for the later stage of the game. So now back to the Mandalorian. So yeah, so I think the ability can be quite powerful against some decks. I also believe that so I kind of feel like it's a little bit similar to the Gideon, where his ability is kind of good, but only against certain decks. And the stats is a bit more expensive, but the stats are higher. The stats are a bit underwhelming as a flipped leader. I think he's relatively underwhelming. The true reason that makes me rate the Mandalorian lower than Gideon is, first of all, yellow-white is still, after Shadow of the Galaxy, still remains one of the weakest color combination in the game. And another thing that I don't like is that he also has the problem of um, like the other is that the equipment, the Mandalorian's spear or whatever it's called, I think this equipment is super situational. I don't think capture is a very powerful mechanic most of the time. So yeah, I'm not super hot on the Mandalorian. I feel like he's a little bit. I think he can be quite good against certain type of deck, but he's gonna miss the mark against a lot of other decks. And I think overall upgrade decks have not really impressed me that much. So for me, I'm gonna put this in playable. I think he's playable, but I don't think he's playable. I think I would definitely rate it a lot lower than Gideon. I would rate it lower than Gideon, but I still think he's playable. I still think there's gonna be an environment where I can see the Mandalorian being quite competitive, but that could be competitive, but I think this is going to be very niche. Uh, Next, we got Gar Saxon. So Gar Saxon, I think, is a far better leader as far as like if you want to be running an equipment kind of base deck. I think he's going to be a better leader than the Mandalorian, simply because his ability is going to be useful against all type of decks. A +1 attack bonus is useful against everything, puts pressure on the opponents. And obviously there is the advantage of having plenty of units in the game that comes into play with a built-in upgrade, but they are shielded. They come into play, they already have a shield on them, which make them more powerful, more resilient, and also gives a bonus attack as well. And giving a +1 bonus attack to a unit that is shielded is quite valuable, generally speaking. So I felt like Gar Saxon has some very powerful synergy. We also seen the combination with 7th Fleet Defender. with the client, with obviously all the 2-drop that are shielded, which is there are plenty of. And so Gar Saxon with yellow, I think, has been kind of a decent deck. I haven't been like super impressed with the deck. I think it's like a good deck, but I think it's a solid enough deck that I would want to put this in the solid category. So it's a deck that can really put a lot of pressure on the opponent with units that are very hard to deal with. I think it's a deck that has weaknesses, and the leader himself is like not super impressive. It's a 4/6, a 7/4/6, but I think the +1 permanent attack bonus is good enough for him to be ranked as a solid leader. The ability to return upgrade whenever a unit dies is also kind of a nice little bonus. So yeah, kind of average leader, but a powerful ability and a lot of card that synergies with him in the set. I think it's enough to make it a solid. I don't know if it's going to be part of the meta, but I think it is solid enough. Next we got Qi'ra. So Qi'ra, I think, is an interesting leader that is relatively hard to rate because she's very different from any other leaders that we've seen. Um, her leader ability can be quite strong with certain units, but it's nothing amazing. Like I think it's really good with the 1/4 for 1 grit, and also with the 1/4 for 2 grit also to a lesser extent. So there's a couple of good units that can work with her. And then basically her ability is very good as she's one of the best overwhelm barrage in the game because she can flip over, divide the health of all the units on the battlefield by half, and then play a barrage. And that barrage is very scary. So she has this ability to kind of uh, take on almost something that is super tanky, like even something that has 8 health. She comes to play, she will have the health, and then she attack into that unit and die. And I think if you're playing Qi'ra just for a flip effect, I think she's kind of underwhelming. And if you're playing her only for her ability, she's going to be super hard to use because only a few units in the game really benefit from that. But if you can combine those two things together in a deck, then she can be quite good. This is why people have been trying to run her in some sort of green mid-rangey control, like a little bit similar than the chronic mid-range green that we've seen, chronic control-y mid-rangey decks that we've seen before, and people are kind of trying to play her in that shell, and in that shell she seems to be quite good. Some people are also thinking about playing her in a hard control as like a leader that has basically no leader's ability, but that can just come into play and basically have all the health of other units, making and then combining this with removal to make removal easier to play and stuff like that. Um, so all those things I think are valid ways to play her. With that being said, I think that whenever you're playing a hard control deck, really the leader himself, it's not really that big of a deal. Like, definitely, if you think about the type of deck that cares the least about what kind of leader they're playing, it has to be the hard control decks. And if you're playing a hard control deck, sometimes you want to be playing something that. So it's a little bit hard to tell which one is big because I think you can play a hard control deck with Qi'ra and be very successful because, as I said, the leaders himself doesn't really matter so much. But I still believe a leader that has a leader ability that's going to be useful throughout the game, like something like an Aiden, is going to be much better in a hard control shell. Also, something to keep in mind is like everybody talks about how powerful or flip or when deployed ability is, but keep in mind that if you when deploy, she's still a 4/4 at the end of the day. So if your opponent has some sort of way to kill her, then you basically have the HP of everybody, and if you cannot follow that up with a barrage or with her attacking and finishing off our targets, then that's not really that good anymore. So overall, I think she's solid. So I'm gonna rate her on the solid note over Gar Saxon. I think she's fine. Moving on, we got Finn. Okay, so Finn is one of those leaders here. I don't really understand what FFG really try to do with this. He has decent stats. I think that's the only good thing going for him. But then his leader ability is absolutely atrocious. Basically, transfer. The only context in which defeating an upgrade to get a shield can be useful is if you're defeating an experience token for a shield. But even that is a very small upgrade. It's very situational. It's very slow. It's a very slow engine. So for now, I think Finn is absolutely unplayable. Like I don't really see any context in which you would want to run Finn, at least with what the card that we have. Uh, Potential for Finn to become better in the future is if FFG releases upgrades that produce an effect when they get defeated. So if there are some sort of upgrade that basically gives you a bonus when they get defeated, then I can see Finn being pretty good. But for now, that's not what we have. There's no such things in the game at the moment. So right now, there's simply no reason to be playing Finn, in my opinion. Next, we got Rey. So I was actually quite underwhelmed when I first saw Rey. I was comparing her to Grand Moff Tarkin. I thought she was kind of on the same ballpark of power level, more expensive with the Restore 3 and the ability to give experience tokens. I played with her quite a bit, and my experience is that she is, in my opinion, one of the best leader of the expansion. And there's a couple of things that changed my mind about her quite radically. The first thing is the fact that the Restore 3 is so much better than I thought it was. Restore 3 is, yes, it does cost one more compared to Gram of Takin, but the Restore 3 is such a big deal. It's such a big deal. It's well worth the extra resources that she requires to be unlocked. Also, the fact that she can give an experience to herself is also very relevant, as she almost going to be always a 3/7 and not a 2/6. And another factor that I completely underappreciated was the fact that there's simply so many heroism unit that benefits a lot from that extra experience token. And one of the best examples for this is probably R2D2. R2D2 is absurd when he gets an extra experience token. He's a 1/4, and then suddenly he's a 2/5 for 2, which is well above stats of anything else in the game, on top of his ability. And then you can even upgrade to a 3/7. So imagine a 3/7 for 3. We already consider a 3/5 to be a good stat line for a 3 job, but imagine a 3/7 for 3 is very strong. So basically, simply their ability is so much more beneficial in heroism, where units have a tendency to have very high health and very low attack value, in which case the experience becomes so much more relevant. So I really like Rey. I think she's the best. She might be the best vigilance heroism leader in the game. She's also Force, which is super relevant, as you know, because there's so many Force interactions in the game. So I think she's gonna be a meta staple. So I don't think she's meta-defining or overpowered, of course, but I think she is meta-stable. I think she is a significant upgrade over the Vigilant Heroism leader that we have in Spark of Rebellion, and I think that's going to be enough for her to be quite a presence in the meta. We'll see how it goes. Moving on, we got Hondo Ohnaka. So Hondo Ohnaka is the ability. So his ability is very situational, because smuggle cards are quite situational. There are a couple of smuggle cards that do see play, of course, but they mostly see play because they are good cards by themselves, and the fact that they are smuggle is only just mostly a bonus. So at the end of the day, cards that you actually do play for their smuggle are actually very rare, because a smuggle is kind of the idea of you get to draw a card because you get to play a card from your resource instead of your hand, so you're basically gaining a card advantage, but you are paying an extra resources to pay that card for the smuggle cost. So it's basically trading tempo in order to get card advantage. And as I said many times, in Star Wars Limited, doing that is very rarely worth it. So in this case, basically, Hondo Ohnaka makes your smuggle a little bit better because they get experience, but I don't think that is enough to really make a smuggle theme deck. At the end of the day, playing cards with smuggle is a huge inconvenience. And so it's an ability that really intervenes in the later stage of the game when you start playing your smuggle cards. So it really intervenes very late in the game, and it's a relatively weak bonus, in my opinion. Not only that, the leader by himself, a 3/7 for 6 raid, is really not that impressive at all, and his ability does not get stronger whenever he's deployed. So for all those reasons, I don't think Hondo Ohnaka is a playable leader in a competitive constructed. It might be good. I think he's going to be much better in draft. I think in draft I can see him being a lot better, but in constructed I don't see him being competitive. Next, we got this beautiful Jabba showcase. By far, in my opinion, the best looking showcase in the set. And Jabba is very interesting. So basically, I think that in the deck that wants to play, so basically the leader himself is not so impressive, but there are a lot of good synergies in the set to go with Jabba. There are a lot of units that gain abilities or become cheaper whenever there's a unit with a bounty, and therefore having the ability to provide a bounty for free is going to be quite valuable if you put all those bounty hunter cards into your deck. So there's a synergy that is going on that is quite cool. Another cool thing about him is the fact that it helps you ramp because it makes you, whenever you manage to kill the unit with the bounty, you reduce the price of the next unit you're going to play. And it turns out that green black has a lot of strong, expensive cards. We know, of course, about Vader, Darth Maul, Jabba's Rancor, which is another reason to play Jabba. Jabba's Rancor because is a pretty solid card. So all those things together makes it for a pretty decent deck. There's also the ability with, I forgot the name, sorry, but the 7 yellow villainy card that basically allows you to play a card that you capture. So basically you would play Jabba, capture a unit, and then play this card to be able to play the unit that you got captured. And that is quite powerful. So um, obviously, just like Palpatine, he has an immediate impact as he gets deployed, but you do need to have another unit to capture that unit. So it sometimes can be a little bit difficult to use. The stat line is really not impressive for 7 cost 2 drop, but 212 is not really what you're looking for. So he has a couple of weaknesses. So overall, what do I think about Jabba? I feel like if you play a I think the fact that you have to play such a specific set of cards to really take advantage of the leader's ability is a big weakness for the leader. Most leaders, I mean, most of the competitive leaders that we see around can be played with a variety of different cards and be competitive. Jabba really needs a specific set of cards, I feel like, to get the best out of him. And I think that's a major weakness. Another weakness as well is that uh, if the capture ability is not good, which is going to be plenty of situations where the capture ability is not good, then the leader is you're paying a lot for a very weak leader, and that's another problem for the leader. So overall, I put the Jabba in the playable category. I think he's going to be decent, but I don't think he's as solid as the other leaders in this that are above. Next, we got Boba Fett Daimyo. So Boba Fett Daimyo is a very interesting leader. I think his ability is his stats are not amazing. It's 4-7 for 6, nothing incredible. And the fact that yes, he's called Boba Fett, so he works with Fire Spray, but Fire Spray being villainy doesn't have the same advantage of the Boba Fett collecting the bounty, the one that we had from Spark of Rebellion. So, but he does make up for all that with an incredibly good leader's ability. Giving +1 attack to all the units with keywords is incredible. It just makes all of your ambush unit +1 attack. And what is very nice about it is like the +1 attack bonus doesn't have to be given to the unit with the keyword. It can be given to another unit. So let's say you have a unit with Sentinel, you have something like Echo-based Defender, and then you play another unit with a keyword, and you can give to +1 attack to the Echo-based Defender that is ready, and that can be very good. So I think the ability is really strong, and I think white white green is an excellent color combination for that ability because this color combination has so many powerful units with ambush or with Sentinel, which are the two main keywords that you're going to be building your deck of. So I think Boba has been quite good. I've seen some pretty strong lists with yellow and with blue, and I think Boba is definitely going to be a leader that's going to be part of the meta. Is it good enough to be ranked on the same level as Rey? It's hard to say. I'm going to put. It's very hard. For me, it's really between this and this. I'm going to put it in the solid category, but I do think quite highly of Boba Daimyo. So I'm definitely thinking between meta staples and solid. It's really hanging between the two. So I'm going to put it on top of the solid tier, which is the B tier. Moving on, we got Hunters. So basically, whenever I saw the card first, I thought it was kind of a joke. I was like, I didn't see what FFG wanted us to do with that card. Yes, he has very good stats and overwhelm. That is nice, but his ability is not only expensive but also extremely situational. We've seen, for example, um, Cassian Andor having an ability that makes you pay one and exhaust in order to draw extra cards, but dealing 3 damage to the opponent is quite of an easy condition to meet in order to draw a card, while here the condition is so much more difficult to reach, which means that the draw is going to be a lot more situational. So basically, a worse version of Cassian Andor's ability, and a leader that is very expensive, difficult to deploy, is basically arguably a worse version of Vader if you compare to Vader. I would much rather have Vader in play. And the ability does not get stronger. I mean, it only barely gets stronger as he deploys. So really, I really was hoping that we would be having a lot of cards to support his ability. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. Hunter did not really get any support in this expansion to realize his potential. So the only thing that he has going for it is his big stats, and obviously there are far better options. So in my opinion, I put this in non-competitive. Um, I put him even under Finn. I think Finn might be slightly better, but just because of the stats, I think it's just slightly better. Moving on, we got Bossk, and Bossk is one of those very synergy-focused leader, where that is he has 2 very powerful abilities. The first one is the ability to deal damage to a unit with a bounty. I think it's quite good if you're playing and have bounty in your deck, which is what you're going to be trying to do. And then when he gets flipped, the ability to trigger twice the bounties is just very powerful. So we've seen Bossk deck, we've seen some aggro Bossk with green and a ramp Bossk with green. 2 different versions of Bossk, and 2 I think that are quite powerful. Um, so what do I think about the deck that goes with Bossk in general? So first of all, first obvious weakness of Bossk is that in order to work, Bossk needs to work very specifically in a very specific kind of deck, and in a very specific kind of deck, and that's going to limit a lot the potential of the card. Another problem with Bossk is the consistency. Bossk has basically a lot of cards which are the enablers, which are the bounty cards themselves, and then the payoffs. And you need to draw both of them in order to have the deck work. It's also a deck that can run out of card very quickly. So there's a lot of I think Bossk is a very impressive deck, but it will suffer consistency issues. Uh, uh, Sometimes it's a deck that can really blow you out and completely demolishes you, and sometimes it's a deck that can lose to itself. So which makes the Bossk relatively hard to rate, because he has those kind of consistency kind of issue, which makes it very difficult. So for me, I decided to put him in a solid category. I'm gonna put him over Gar Saxon but below Qi'ra. Next we have Bo-Katan, and Bo-Katan is supposed to be the Mandalorian leader for building a Mandalorian themed deck. The problem is that running Mandalorian, so she has 2 problems. First of all, she has kind of an identity issues, because obviously all the Mandalorian cards in the set are very aggressive. There are a lot of very strong, aggressive 2-drops, which I think has the best Mandalorian cards. And yes, the entire deck really wants you to build like an aggro deck, and the ability is not really an aggro ability; it deals damage to units. So there's kind of a it kind of has this identity issue. The other problem that I have is that right now Mandalorian synergies are relatively weak. At least they are weak if you compare them to the Rebel synergies. Rebel synergies are far more powerful and far more consistent and far more numerous than the Mandalorian synergies. So if you really want to build like a kind of a tribal deck based on a specific unit type, you're much better off going for Rebels and Mandalorian. Um, Even if you wanted to build and finally the nail in the coffin for Bo-Katan is the fact that if you really want to build a Mandalorian theme deck, you might actually be better off going for Sabine, because not only is Sabine a Mandalorian herself, but she also leaned better towards the aggressive game plan than the Mandalorian cards want you to go for. So Right now, I'm not seeing it. I don't think the leader is terrible in a vacuum. I just think there's just not enough Mandalorian support in the set to really make the card work. There's a lot of Mandalorian synergies, but they are very weak synergies, not strong synergies. And the second problem is the competition with Sabine. And for the reason, I don't think she's going to be competitive. Moving on, we're talking about Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren is finally we're getting a truly aggressive focused leaders in Shadow of the Galaxy, and this leader can be very, very impressive and very explosive. His ability to discard a card, give plus 2 attack to a unit, is very all-in, but very powerful in an aggressive deck. Right now, we don't have too many discard synergies, but I'm expecting to get more of them in the future set. But already right now, this ability is nothing to scoff at. And coming in, if you are building the deck properly, you can really come in as a 5/4 for 4 relatively consistently. And a 5/4 for 4 is actually pretty impressive most of the time and can really put a lot of pressure on the opponent. So Kylo Ren is a very all-in deck, but there's a couple of issues with it. Just like for some of the other leaders on this list, you really need to be building a very specific list to really make Kylo Ren work. And this strategy is very all-in, and it's very kind of like very eye rolly. Like it either works or it fails miserably. It's very easy to counter, so maybe you can take someone by surprise with Kylo Ren and really do some impressive stuff. But if you're playing in someone who knows the deck and has proper anti-aggro cards, you can just lose miserably. So once again, you can be lucky and win some pretty good games with Kylo Ren, but I feel like the deck is extremely inconsistent and very high rolly. So I'm going to put it in playable over the Mandalorian, but under uh, um, Moff Gideon. Next we got Han Solo, the new Han Solo, the red Han Solo, and the last leaders that we actually seen. And uh, it is obviously everybody said he's the best leader of the expansion, and I agree with that. I agree that Han Solo is undeniably the best leader in the expansion. So now let's kind of talk about how good he is compared of most of the Spark of Rebellion leaders. And in my opinion is that compared to the other Spark of Rebellion leaders, he's about in the same, like he's on the same power level as the competitive Spark of Rebellion leaders that we've seen. So I don't think he's like amazing. I just think he's very good, and he's the best leader of the expansion for sure. So why is he so strong? Well, first of all, dealing damage unit in order to make them cheaper is something that is quite strong of a synergies. There's loads of synergies with it, whether it's grid units or simply unit that don't really care about their stats, so that you just play them for their abilities. You can build aggressive version of Han. There's also a wide variety of build. So one of the great qualities of Han Solo, just like for Rey, by the way, and kind of the common point between those two cards is that not only are those leaders pretty solid, but they're also not restricted to a very specific path, like something like a Bossk or a Gar Saxon. You can play a wide variety of different decks that are utilizing his ability. You can build him in aggro, you can build him in ramp, you can build him in swarm, and that's quite good. So he has a weakness, of course, a relatively bad stat. 3645 is really not that impressive, but I think his leader ability is so good that it's well worth that. Also, I believe that the aggression white is still one of the strongest color combination in the game, and it got a lot of support in that expansion. So for all those reasons, Han Solo is going to be a meta staple. I don't think it's going to be meta defining in the same way as um, a Boba is meta defining. I don't think people are going to start playing weird tech in order to kill him. Like I don't think he's going to be confining the meta the same way as Boba will, but he's definitely going to be part of the meta. Definitely people will learn to respect it, and is very strong. I think he's on the same power level as the old Han. He's on the same power level as all the great other leaders that we've seen in Spark of Rebellion. But I don't want to put in. I don't want to. I'm not putting it on top here because I don't think he's on the same power level as Boba Fett. And I don't think that's even close, to be honest. So he's the best leader of the expansion, yes, but I don't think he's quite up there. Moving on, we got Cad Bane, and Cad Bane has impressed me a lot. I think this leader can have a very powerful ability, especially if you combine him with red Tarkin Town plays a lot of. You can play the shock, like the 2 damage card that costs 1. You even open fires, or even of course Tarkin Town to finish off the enemy units once you've softened them with your ability. The ability is easy to trigger. It is cheap. It doesn't require any special setup. Just play underworld units, which there's plenty of in this set. The main problem with Cad Bane, and I said this in my previous in my first impression of the card, is that he has to compete with Boba collecting the bounty. And if you try to build a deck with Cad Bane and try to build a deck with Boba, you will realize often that Boba is going to be the stronger option most of the time. There are situations where I think Cad Bane Red might be better than Boba Red because of all those damage synergy, and is definitely going to become a more controlly leader because of the nature of his ability, and also because he's slightly more expensive. But yeah, overall I think he's a very good leader. I think he's solid. But yeah, the comparison with Boba is going to make him suffer. I'm going to put him over Gar Saxon, but under Bossk. Next we got Dr. Aphra, and I said it in my first impression video, and I said it in my previous video, and I said unless they give Dr. Aphra a tremendous amount of support in this set, Dr. Aphra is going to be the worst leader in the game. Why do I think so? Well, first, now we've seen the entire set, and she got absolutely zero support. She got 0 cards. I think the only there's a Fennec unit that is kind of a little bit synergistic with the card, and yeah, that's about it. There's basically 0 card in this set that synergize with her ability to self-mill. So she's the worst leader in the game, and I'll explain why. So basically, first of all, she has horrendous stats. 2-5 for 5 is terrible. If she gets the +3 attack bonus, she's a 5-5. But here's the thing, it is far from guaranteed that you're gonna get 5 cards with different cost in your discard pile, because basically by the time you play her, you're gonna be discarding, thanks to her ability, 3 cards from your discard pile, because that's gonna be turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, then turn 4 you deploy her, right? So you're gonna have 4 cards in your discard pile. The odds that all those 4 cards have different costs, and then you need to put another card in the discard pile, and you need all 5 of those cards to have a different cost. So basically, it's very unlikely that Dr. Aphra will ever be 5 attack when she deploys. So, when she deploys. And not only that, she has a counter synergy because she's also going to be returning one of those 5 cards back into your hand with her ability. So that means that she will be even more difficult to become a 5-5. So basically, she's never going to be a 5-5 when she deploys. So that means she's going to have the time a million times to die before that happens. So she's very, very low impact as she deploys. She has effectively no leader ability, and all she does is just milling yourself. So milling yourself can have some advantages, but right now, as I said, there is basically no card that really benefits from a substantial. So it is more of a downside as an upside, because let's say you want to play a control version of Dr. Aphra, which is an idea that has been thrown around, is like, oh yeah, you don't play her for the self-milling synergies, you just play her as a leader that comes into play, draws you a card, and that does 5-5, so you can go like barrage and do some stuff with it or whatever, like kind of a control kind of leader. But the problem is, like, in a control leader, having to self-mill is a very big deal, because it means that you're running against your own clock throughout the game, because this is not a may ability, it is a must ability. You have to discard a card, and if you're playing in a mirror control and your opponent is going to go knows that you're milling yourself every turn, that is just super nasty. So I've seen some ideas being thrown around where you play when you have normal cards in your deck, you basically play resupply, and now you have a perfect set of cards and stuff. But all this is like, I don't see how this can work in a practical game. If you're playing against anything else than control, there's no way you can get to that point without a proper leader. And if you're running in a mirror match, the opponent can just say, well, wait until you got you play restock, and then he goes Sorry, I meant restock, no resupply earlier. Sorry. And Impermanent goes vigilance and just mills your entire deck and you lose the game. So it's like I don't see how I can not imagine how this can be playable. I think this is by far the worst leader in the game. Once again, there might be a world later on when there is more cards where she's gonna make sense, but right now she doesn't make sense. I'm also gonna reiterate the point that I made in my first impression video, saying that even if one day there's gonna be a self-milled deck that's gonna appear, I'm not sure that Dr. Aphra will be the right leader for it, because at the end of the day, only one mill per turn is not a lot of milling. Just saying. Next we got Fennec Shand. So Fennec Shand is interesting. I think she's a hard leader to evaluate because she has a very powerful leader ability, but a horrible stats once again for when she deploys. So she's a little bit difficult to rate for that reason. I think the problem with her leader's ability is like it's very strong in the early stage of the game, but once you reach a certain point of the game, it starts to become like not so amazing. And obviously very bad stats. With that being said, she does have Saboteur, which is a very important keyword in that expansion. It feels like there's been a lot of shielded unit. And once again, the problem of yellow-white not being a very good color combination. So, hard to rate this card. In my opinion, I'm going to put it at the bottom of like, I think she's playable, and she might be a certain context, a certain meta when she's going to be, when this kind of deck can be very good. I think she can be very good against aggro, for example. But overall, I don't believe in her. I think it's really in between the not competitive and playable. It's really hanging between the two. I'm going to put it at the bottom of playable. Finally, I'll talk about our friend Lando Calrissian, and I've been extremely unimpressed with this card. First of all, I will reiterate the point that I don't think Smuggle is a mechanic. I think that you are going to be running Smuggle cards in your deck because those cards are good by themselves and the Smuggle is just a bonus. I don't think you're going to be running. I think having to run like a lot of Smuggle cards in your deck, I think is a substantial cost. Um, he deploys very early in the game, which is kind of cool, but once again, I don't think his playstyle leans towards being very aggressive. So in this case, being able to deploy super early doesn't really matter so much. Um, the fact that making your smuggle cards cost cheaper, so basically, is kind of a card draw ability, right? But you are sacrificing, you're making a huge sacrifice in order to do so because you have to defeat a resource permanently whenever you do that. So yeah, I don't really understand what kind of deck you can build with Lando that actually works. I think this leader just simply just sucks. I don't think any of what he does works. And even I'm not really convinced that he has any potential for the future because the fact that there's a limit on only use abilities can be only used once per turn means that you can't even do some crazy combo with him. I can't even imagine some sort of combo deck built around his ability that would eventually work. So to me, it is going to be in a non-competitive category. I'm going to place him over Finn. Yeah, that's basically my tier list here for Shadow of the Galaxy. Obviously, always keep in mind that this tier list is made even before the release of the game. There's a lot of those leaders that I haven't actually played. So it is worth what it's worth. So just this is a big caveat. But I think I hope that I'm going to be relatively close to reality. And obviously, if you disagree with anything that I have said, feel free to say it on the comments below, and feel free to share some thoughts about what I'm saying here. Anyway, if you like that video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.